in a good direction, going in quite a bad one.
We will take a pragmatic approach.
This is a direct attack.
You're watching it happen in real time. America is losing trust around the world, not through big speeches, but in the way goods move, especially where it hits home the most, your groceries. The US used to be every nation's top choice for trade. Now, Canada is stealing the spotlight, and it's dazzling. In the last year, 11 countries have shifted their food exports away from the US, sending them north instead. From wine to wheat, it's all changing. Today, we'll reveal the 11 countries now picking Canada over the US for their grocery needs. What comes up at number 4 could topple whole sections of American imports. Let's dive in. Number 11, chili. You won't read about it in the headlines, but grocery aisles on Canada's west coast are transforming. Quietly and steadily, in ways most Americans aren't ready for. Where apple bins and avocado crates once bore, product of California, labels, shoppers in Vancouver and Calgary now see stickers saying, product of Chile. This isn't a random glitch or a short-term trend. It's a major change that picked up pace in early 2025. It wasn't driven by protests or politics, but by fresh produce. Behind the scenes, Chilean farming groups teamed up with Canadian trade officials to create a fast-track deal for fruit, wine, and cold-stored exports. With the US stuck in new cross-border checks, Chilean exporters found Canada's rules much easier to navigate. Walmart Canada acted quickly. Leaders struck a 3-year agreement with Chile's Fruit Exporters Association, securing space for grapes, blueberries, and citrus that used to head to the US. The logic was straightforward: avoid delays, reduce waste, and meet a growing Canadian demand for global produce with clear origins. Chile saw a smart opportunity too. They locked in a strong position in a G7 country without the risk of sudden US tariffs or port holdups. People close to the deal say this isn't just about logistics, it's a reputation boost. Chile now calls Canada its main market for North American grocery chains, using Canadian cities as launchpads for the continent. The numbers prove it. In the first quarter of 2025, fruit shipments from Chile to Canada jumped over 22%, while exports to the US dropped 15% due to new inspection delays. This isn't a diplomatic fight, it's a calculated move to shift agricultural ties. And it's just the start. But if you think this is only a South American story, wait until you hear what a Caribbean nation just did. Number 10, Jamaica. Most people think of Jamaica for its music, beaches, and rum. But behind the scenes, it's making a bold move in North American grocery logistics. The turning point wasn't a diplomatic spat, it was red tape. In 2024, new US FDA inspection rules stretched port approval times for tropical foods by up to 12 days. That wasn't just a hassle, it killed freshness. Bananas turned brown, rum sat idle, and containers piled up in Miami and Houston, racking up fees and breaking cold chains. Exporters in Kingston and Montego Bay had had enough. Their quiet fix? Canada. Ottawa's food import rules, though strict, offered pre-clearance deals, a perk the US didn't provide. Within 6 months, Jamaica reshaped its North American shipping routes to favor Toronto, Halifax, and Vancouver. This new approach, nicknamed the North Star Pivot by Caribbean trade leaders, was about survival. In a striking move, Jamaica's government declared Canada its top food logistics hub for all of North America, a statement that raised eyebrows in Washington. Canadian wholesalers jumped in with speed and scale. Grocery giant Metro doubled its Caribbean product space by spring 2025, bringing in rum, bananas, plantains, and callaloo through updated trade channels. Even Air Canada cargo planes started carrying more freight to Kingston than tourist luggage back. The new trade pattern was set, and Jamaica, without much noise, cut its grocery exports to the US by over 18% in less than 9 months. Experts watching this change think it's the start of a bigger shift, not just in food, but in influence. When countries decide where their food goes first, they're also choosing who they trust most. Let's move east, where a European giant just picked a new grocery partner. These aren't just exports, they're battles on store shelves. If you're watching, you're ahead of the news. Like and subscribe now, because one of the next 5 countries could affect your weekly meals. Number 9, Germany. Blocks of aged Gouda and Wheels of Edam that once filled high-end US markets are now skipping American ports altogether. Instead, they're heading straight to chilled Canadian warehouses, destined for fancy grocers in Toronto and Montreal. This isn't just a food fad, it's a complete trade overhaul. In 2025, Germany's Agricultural Export Authority quietly sent nearly a third of its gourmet food shipments to Canada instead of the US. Why? While US customs tightened rules on European dairy over compliance issues, Canada offered a welcoming hand, not a wall of paperwork. The data doesn't show how fast Canadian importers grabbed those goods. Within weeks, Ontario distributors like Arla Foods and John K. Overholt signed new deals with German exporters to dodge the messy US entry process. In the first 2 quarters of 2025, Canada's imports of German processed meats, mustards, and baked goods shot up over 28%. Meanwhile, New York and Chicago saw bare spots where bratwurst and rye crisps used to be. Even German grocery giants Aldi and Lidl boosted their Canadian distribution hubs, using cities like Hamilton and Laval as new bases for central continent supply. Few outside the industry notice this shift, but its impact is huge. German food reps now call Canada their North American anchor, a title once held by Los Angeles or Miami. And it's not just fancy treats. Everyday items like pretzels, canned goulash, and pickled veggies are flowing north while US stores rush to rework deals. This isn't just about tariffs, it's about dependability, and Canada is winning for now. But one Asian country is rewriting the grocery game in ways even Germany didn't expect. Number 8, South Korea. The instant noodles that made Korean food brands famous, Ottogai, Nongshim, Samyang, were held up at US ports in 2025 due to new packaging and labeling rules. What should have been a simple restock turned into a logistics nightmare for Korean exporters, who saw their top North American market, the US, become a bureaucratic mess. So, they shifted quietly, carefully, with the precision of their tech exports. South Korea redirected over $150 million in food shipments from the US to Canada in just 5 months. What experts saw next surprised even seasoned trade watchers. Costco Canada signed exclusive deals with 3 top Korean brands, promising steady shelf space in exchange for direct routes to British Columbia and Alberta. At the same time, Canadian food stores expanded their Korean sections, doubling offerings by spring 2025. In Metro Vancouver, Korean soy sauce outsold American brands for the first time. South Korean barley and rice, once headed for Southern California's Korean communities, are now processed in Manitoba and spread across Canadian provinces. Insiders say this wasn't random. Korean trade officials had been planning since late 2024, sensing trouble with US customs. What Canada offered, clear rules, steady checks, and quick port turnarounds, wasn't just handy, it was smart. Now, South Korean food giants are setting up long-term hubs in Halifax and Toronto. One Korean trade minister even called Canada Asia's bridge to North American kitchens. While US grocery chains struggle with backlogs, Canadians are already enjoying South Korea's clever move. But it's not just noodles and sauces. The next country shifted entire meat, sugar, and grain industries to Canada, and the scale is mind-blowing. Number 7, Brazil. The shipping crates tell the tale before diplomats do. Containers of Brazilian beef, frozen poultry, raw sugar, and ethanol byproducts, once bound for Houston and Savannah, now unload daily in Halifax, Montreal, and Prince Rupert. And they're not just testing the waters, they're at full capacity. Brazil, a global farming powerhouse, has made one of the boldest food trade pivots of the decade. What caused it? A quiet but harsh change. In 2025, the US added carbon border taxes that hit Brazilian meat and sugar exports with up to 18% surcharges, citing deforestation and climate issues. Brasilia didn't fight back with threats, it redirected trade. Canada saw the chance and moved fast. Trade reps from Alberta and Saskatchewan opened a quick import lane with Brazilian giants like JBS, Marfrig, and BRF. Within 2 quarters, Brazil supplied nearly 20% of Canada's processed meat market. Alberta's food processors, short on local supply and facing rising US costs, signed Brazilian deals worth over $2 billion Canadian dollars. Ethanol refiners in Manitoba, pushed by green fuel rules, started importing Brazilian sugarcane ethanol, now 10% of the province's gasoline blend. Insiders in Brazil's agriculture ministry now call Canada their northern anchor, a term never used before for anyone but China or the US. The bond grew stronger with the 2024 launch of the Brazil-Canada Renewable Energy Fund, which supports food-grade ethanol and clean energy projects. While US grocers scramble to replace lost beef and sugar, Canadian shelves stay stocked, quietly gaining from Brazil's shift. It's not just about food, it's about trust, rules, and shared goals. And while Brazil's move is huge, what France just did might be the most meaningful shift yet. Number 6. France. When French wine skips Manhattan and lands in Moncton, or foie gras unpacks in Calgary instead of Los Angeles, the message is clear. France, long a steady trade partner for the US, has started a deliberate pullback. 2025 was the turning point. After the US hit premium European foods with 25% tariffs, France didn't lash out, it redirected invoices to Canada. The change was quiet, planned, and obvious. In just 9 months, French food exports to Canada rose over 18%, hitting 22 billion Canadian dollars for the first time. Chandon and Veuve Clicquot reworked their North American plans, sending 30% of their stock through Vancouver and Montreal. Loblaw and Quebec retailers added premium French sections, backed by an updated Canada-EU deal that includes a tariff relief clause to dodge US policy swings. Now, Canadians get faster access to luxury French goods, often cheaper than in the US. But it's more than wine and soft cheeses. In Paris, farm ministers openly call Canada their preferred entry into North America's food scene. High-end fashion brands now ship co-branded items, truffle oils, designer chocolates, luxury jams, straight to Toronto's main streets. Canadian grocers, once wary of prices, now see French goods as key draws for wealthy shoppers tired of US shortages. Few mention the deeper impact. France's cultural exports have always been soft power. Now that influence skips the US, cementing Canada as a culinary ally. In diplomacy, that shift speaks louder than tariffs ever could. But the next country didn't just tweak its food policy, it overhauled its grain strategy, with global ripples. Number 5. Egypt. In 2024, after US grain prices jumped due to Midwest weather issues and global bidding, Egypt, the world's top wheat buyer, faced a serious shortage. Cairo had long relied on American grain to keep its food subsidies steady. But with delays, price spikes, and rising shipping costs from Gulf ports, Egypt looked elsewhere. What it found was Canada, cooler, calmer, and far more dependable. By early 2025, Egyptian trade officials signed new wheat deals with Saskatchewan farmers, marking a big change in how they source their daily bread. The partnership went beyond raw grain. Canadian ag-tech startups provided real-time shipping data and yield predictions tailored for North African needs, giving Egyptian millers something they hadn't had from the US in years: stability. In one quarter, over 60% of Egypt's new wheat deals came from Canadian producers. Grain shipments flowed from Halifax to the Mediterranean with fewer holdups and better quality. Few outside farming circles noticed, but insiders call it one of the decade's biggest grain logistics shifts. Egypt didn't just adjust, it rebuilt its long-term food security plan. Canadian officials confirmed a bilateral wheat guarantee, ensuring minimum shipments during global disruptions. US exporters, once kings in Egypt, now face empty stores and lost influence in a key trade tie. This isn't just about supply, it's a trust signal. When a nation reassigns its food lifeline, it's picking who it leans on in tough times. Egypt chose Canada. But it's not just foreign policy reshaping grocery lanes, America's next-door neighbor is also turning away. Number 4. Mexico. For decades, it was easy. The US fed Mexico, and Mexico fed the US. Trucks of avocados, strawberries, and tequila crossed the border constantly. But after 2025's renewed trade tensions and politically driven inspections slowed things down, Mexican producers made a historic call. They turned north, not to the US, but to Canada. It started with fruit. Delays at the southern US border let Mexican avocados rot in transit. Exporters from Michoacán, once tied to California buyers, began wooing Canadian chains hungry for fresh produce. Loblaw and Metro acted fast, offering refrigerated rail routes and upfront payment deals to secure supply. In 6 months, Canada's Mexican fruit imports surged over 30%, while US buyers struggled to renegotiate amid political chaos. The shift wasn't just about fruit. Mexico's spirits industry, tequila and mezcal, faced new US labeling rules that hurt sales. Canadian liquor boards boosted imports, launching South of the North campaigns that made Mexican spirits hits in Vancouver, Edmonton, and beyond. Meanwhile, tortilla and salsa makers redirected shipments from Los Angeles to Montreal, citing smoother checks and better shelf timing. Mexican logistics firms even redrew their maps, sending goods through the port of Manzanillo to Canada's Pacific gateways, skipping the US entirely. Farm ministers from both nations recently unveiled a NAFTA Plus produce deal that prioritizes tariff-free food trade between Mexico and Canada, while US talks stall. This isn't just business, it's a neighborly realignment. Mexico isn't abandoning the US, but it's playing it safe. In groceries, where freshness counts in hours, that safety means real impact, jobs, and trust. The next country, a global spice leader, could transform every North American kitchen next year. Number 3, India. You can smell the difference. Turmeric, cumin, and cardamom now fill Canadian grocery aisles like never before. For decades, Indian exports, spices, lentils, rice, tea, flowed steadily to the US. But in 2024, new US safety reviews and tighter import quotas caused huge backlogs at ports like New York and Long Beach. Containers sat, contracts lapsed, and India, the world's top lentil and basmati rice producer, quietly looked elsewhere. Canada welcomed them with open arms and shelves. Trade officials in Ontario set up fast clearance lanes for Indian goods, and within months, exporters rerouted massive dry goods shipments to Toronto and Vancouver instead of Boston or Houston. Canadian giants like Sobeys and Longo's signed long-term deals with Indian spice firms, ensuring prime shelf space and regular restocks. By early 2025, Indian spice imports to Canada jumped over 20%, while US imports fell 12% in the same time. But it wasn't just food, it was infrastructure. Indian companies like Tata Consumer Products and Adani Agri Logistics built warehouses in Brampton and Surrey, linking their supply chains to Canada's retail network. Frozen parathas, pickled veggies, and Ayurvedic products once headed for New York now target downtown Calgary and Ottawa. Experts tracking this say it's just starting. With Canada's growing South Asian community and trade policies focused on stability over politics, India is a stronger partner. US grocers, once sure of their Indian import edge, now face higher costs and lower priority from India's top farming groups. And while India's move is loud, the next one might be the most symbolic, involving a nation whose US bonds seemed unbreakable. Number 2, the United Kingdom. It wasn't Brexit that sparked this, it was biscuits, shortbread, tea, clotted cream, and lemon curd. Items once proudly stacked in US stores are now heading elsewhere. By late 2024, post-Brexit trade challenges and new US labelling laws created friction in British-American grocery trade. US buyers demanded extra audits, British exporters hesitated, and Canada, always quick to seize quiet chances, stepped up. British food exports to Canada rose 21% in less than 10 months. It wasn't a big policy shift, just lots of small tweaks. Provincial agencies dropped extra packaging rules. Canadian chains boosted UK-branded aisles. Stores like Farm Boy and Save on Foods added British heritage sections with goods from Cornwall, Yorkshire, and Kent. Meanwhile, Liverpool's port quietly rerouted shipments from New Jersey to Halifax. One British trade official called it a strategic step away from uncertainty, meaning US politics. The UK didn't want its valuable food goods stuck in red tape, port jams, or tariff games. The clearest sign came in early 2025 when the UK's Trade Department named Canada the most stable North American food partner, a label that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. From digestives to English mustard, British products are now in more Canadian pantries than ever, not just in expat hubs like Victoria or Toronto, but in rural towns too. For the US, it's not just lost stock, it's a crack in a cultural tie that once felt solid. As one London distributor put it bluntly, Canada's easier to work with, period. But nothing prepared us for what came next. The top grocery trade switch isn't just surprising, it's earth-shaking. Number 1, Japan. It began with silence. Empty shelves in San Francisco, where miso, matcha, and soy sauce once stood, and full shelves in Toronto, where they suddenly appeared. For decades, Japan's food export plan for North America had one rule: the US comes first. But in 2025, that rule was silently, devastatingly broken. The trigger? Not politics or war, but bureaucracy, a new US customs overhaul adding inspections and longer clearance delays for East Asian foods. For Japanese exporters, it wasn't just inconvenient, it was insulting. Sources near Japan's agriculture ministry say trade leaders have warned Washington since 2023 to no avail. Canada acted fast. Ottawa widened pre-clearance food deals with Japan, sped up port processes, and offered something Tokyo hadn't seen from the US in years: respect. The shift was immediate. In the first half of 2025, over $3.2 billion in Japanese grocery exports moved to Canada, up 34% from the year before. What followed was a total redo of Japanese grocery logistics. Sushi-grade fish now lands in Vancouver. Soy condiments like tamari and ponzu stock Calgary and Montreal first. Japanese green tea makers sign exclusive deals with Canadian chains like T&T and Loblaws. Even cultural favorites like mochi, daifuku, and pickled plums, once limited to US Asian stores, now hit mainstream Canadian shelves. The real shock came in a trade update. Japan listed Canada, not the US, as its primary North American food partner. That's no mistake, it's a reordering of global trust. This isn't just about logistics, it's about pride. For Japan, food exports are cultural diplomacy. When the trust waned, Canada stepped in with open ports, steady policies, and a handshake that mattered. Trade wars don't always erupt, they wear away. With Japan gone, the message to America is clear: no loyalty lasts forever, not even at the dinner table. Canada's gaining ground. But for how long? What happens in the next food crisis? Tell us where you're watching from and what changes you're seeing. Comment, like, and subscribe. The grocery aisle is the new battleground.